The air in the sterile lawyer's office was thick with a silence that felt heavier than the humid New York summer outside. My brother, Michael, fidgeted with his tie, his usual boisterous energy subdued by the occasion. Across from him, Aunt Carol dabbed delicately at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, a performance I knew all too well. Beside me, Uncle George, ever the pragmatist, simply stared at his polished shoes, an aura of strained patience about him. They were all here for Mom, or rather, for what Mom had left behind. I, however, felt a different kind of anticipation. A cool, quiet confidence settled in my chest, a stark contrast to their visible grief and thinly veiled greed. I'd spent years, decades really, being the overlooked one, the difficult child, the one who didn't quite fit into the family's picture-perfect narrative. While Michael was praised for his ambition, and Aunt Carol for her tireless devotion to family affairs, I was always just Amelia, the one who asked too many questions, who saw through the polite smiles to the sharp edges beneath. Mr. Henderson, Mom's longtime attorney, cleared his throat, his voice a low rumble that cut through the tension. As you all know, we are here today for the reading of Mrs. Eleanor Vance's last will and testament. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Aunt Carol let out a soft sob, her eyes darting towards me as if seeking a shared moment of sorrow. I offered a bland, polite smile in return, a flicker of amusement in my eyes that I hoped she wouldn't catch. He continued, detailing the formalities, the date of signing, the witnesses. It was all preamble, of course. They just wanted to get to the good part, the division of spoils. I watched their faces, a morbid fascination taking hold. Michael, ever the optimist, probably envisioned himself inheriting the bulk of Mom's substantial investment portfolio, finally able to expand his floundering tech startup. Aunt Carol, no doubt, had her sights set on the antique jewelry and the sprawling Hamptons estate, believing her loyalty entitled her to them. Uncle George, pragmatic to a fault, would simply want whatever cash he could get his hands on to shore up his own failing businesses. I knew better. I always did. Mom and I had a complicated relationship, built on a foundation of unspoken truths and a shared, sharp-edged cynicism about the world. They saw a frail, elegant woman. I saw a survivor, a strategist, someone who understood the true nature of power. And I, more than anyone else, understood her final brilliant move. Mr. Henderson finally reached the core of the document. After specific bequests to various charities and a modest endowment for her beloved cat, Mr. Tibbles, he read, a slight tremor in his voice, as if even he found this next part a little scandalous. Mrs. Eleanor Vance leaves her entire remaining estate, including all real property, financial assets, and personal effects, to her daughter, Amelia Vance. A collective gasp filled the room. Michael's jaw dropped, his face paling to an ashen gray. Aunt Carol's handkerchief fell forgotten to the floor, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and outrage. Uncle George, for the first time, looked up from his shoes, his brow furrowed in disbelief. The silence that followed was no longer heavy, but sharp, brittle, ready to shatter. The air crackled with their unspoken accusations, their simmering resentment. And in that moment, as their world crumbled, mine was just beginning. If you're enjoying this gripping story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of honking taxis and indifferent pedestrians. The opulent funeral home flowers, now wilting in my car, seemed to mock the suffocating tension that had erupted in Mr. Henderson's office. Michael had stormed out, shouting promises of legal challenges and disinheritance that sounded hollow even to his own ears. Aunt Carol had issued a series of dramatic pronouncements about family honor and Amelia's supposed manipulation, her voice cracking with theatrical emotion. Uncle George had simply given me a long, searching look, a glint of something I couldn't quite decipher in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or a dawning, unwelcome understanding. They saw it as a betrayal, a theft. I saw it as Mom's final, perfect act of justice. For years, they had basked in her reflected glory, taking her generosity for granted, their conversations laced with condescension towards me. They called me aloof, cold, unfeeling. They never understood that my reserve was a shield, a necessary defense against their relentless, shallow judgments. Mom understood. She saw the steel beneath my quiet exterior, the strategic mind that mirrored her own. She knew I wouldn't squander what she'd built. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of minimalist calm, felt different now. The legal documents, thick and imposing, lay on my coffee table, a testament to Mom's meticulous planning. The weight of it all was immense, not in terms of responsibility, but in the sheer audacity of her trust. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown down. They expected me to falter, to crumble under their inevitable onslaught. They underestimated me, just as they always had. I poured myself a generous glass of scotch, the amber liquid catching the late afternoon light. The city lights began to twinkle outside my window, a vast, indifferent expanse that somehow felt comforting. This was my domain now, the Vance legacy. The carefully constructed facade of familial harmony was mine to navigate, mine to control. Michael would try to leverage his supposed tech genius. Aunt Carol would play the victim. Uncle George would employ his dubious business acumen. They would scheme. They would connive. They would underestimate me at every turn. The thought sent a shiver of anticipation through me. It was a dangerous game, this inheritance, but I was ready. Mom had armed me not just with wealth, but with her own hard-won wisdom. She had taught me to observe, to analyze, to strike when the moment was right, and the moment was now. Let them play their hand. I was already 3 steps ahead. The phone call came precisely 2 days later, just as I'd predicted. Michael, his voice strained and sycophantic, tried to play the concerned brother. "Amelia, darling, I've been so worried about you. This must be an incredible shock. I wanted to see how you were holding up. And, well, I was thinking, perhaps we could get together, maybe discuss how we might, manage things. Together." His thinly veiled attempt at manipulation was almost laughable. He wanted access, information. He wanted to gauge my defenses. "Michael," I replied, my voice smooth as silk, "I appreciate your concern. I'm managing perfectly well. As for managing things together, I believe Mom was quite clear in her will. It's all mine." I let the silence hang, allowing the implication to sink in. He sputtered for a moment, his carefully constructed facade cracking. But that's not fair, Amelia. Mom wouldn't have wanted this. We're family." "Family?" I echoed, a cold amusement lacing my tone. "Funny, I don't recall seeing much of that family in recent years, unless it was to solicit something. Mom made her wishes known, Michael, and I intend to honor them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have business to attend to." I hung up before he could respond, leaving him to stew in his own indignant fury. Next came Aunt Carol, her voice a theatrical wail. "Oh, Amelia, my dear. Such a shock. I've been praying for you. It's all so overwhelming, isn't it? You're so young, so unworldly. I worry you'll be taken advantage of. Perhaps I could help you navigate this. I've always been so close to Mom. I understand her sensitivities. She meant her vulnerabilities, her weaknesses, which Carol had always exploited with a smile. "Aunt Carol," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "Mom was a formidable woman, and she chose me to inherit her estate precisely because she knew I could handle it. I don't need your help. I need you to respect her final wishes." Her performance escalated, tears flowing freely, though I suspected they were as genuine as a $3 bill. "But the jewelry? Mom promised me that ruby necklace for my 60th, and the cottage in the Hamptons. It's always been our family retreat." "Mom's will was very specific," I stated, my tone unwavering. "Everything remaining goes to me. I suggest you focus on your own life, Aunt Carol, rather than dwelling on what might have been." I ended the call with a polite but firm goodbye. Finally, Uncle George called. His approach was different, less dramatic, more calculating. "Amelia, congratulations. A significant inheritance. Your mother was a shrewd woman. I've always admired her business sense. I've got a few ventures that could use some capital, and I think, given our family connection, it would be mutually beneficial if we could explore some investment opportunities. I'm thinking long-term growth, leveraging the Vance name." "Uncle George," I interrupted, cutting him off before he could launch into his usual spiel of dubious financial schemes. Mom's will is clear. The estate is mine to manage. I'll be making my own investment decisions. Thank you for your offer. His silence was more telling than any words. He understood the game had changed. The first shots had been fired. They had made their moves, testing the waters, probing for weaknesses. But I was ready. Their predictable tactics only served to confirm my mother's judgment. They were predictable, and I was not. The Vance family mansion, perched on a manicured bluff overlooking the Hudson River, was a monument to Mom's refined taste, and unfortunately, to her family's sense of entitlement. Now, it was mine. The day I received the keys felt surreal. The grand oak door creaked open, revealing an opulent foyer bathed in the soft glow of a cloudy afternoon. Sunlight, filtered through stained glass windows, painted ethereal patterns on the marble floor. Dust motes danced in the quiet air, the only movement in the hushed stillness. It was a stark contrast to the vibrant, almost aggressive energy of my apartment. Here, every antique piece of furniture, every silk tapestry, whispered stories of a life I had observed from the periphery. Mom's presence was palpable, yet absent. It was a hollow echo, a beautiful shell waiting to be filled. Michael had been furious when I'd informed him I was taking possession immediately. He'd envisioned a prolonged legal battle, a slow, agonizing process where he could wear me down. He hadn't anticipated my swift, decisive action. Aunt Carol had threatened to contest the will, her voice shrill with indignation. But her threats, I knew, were as empty as Michael's business proposals. Her lawyer had advised her against it, recognizing the ironclad nature of Mom's will. The first few days were spent in a quiet, meticulous inventory. I wasn't just cataloging possessions. I was dissecting the remnants of my family's expectations and my mother's legacy. Each room held a memory, some fond, many tinged with the familiar dynamics of our fractured relationships. The formal dining room, where countless strained holiday dinners had been endured. The library, where Mom had spent her quiet evenings, a glass of sherry always within reach, the scent of old paper and leather a comforting constant. The art studio, meticulously preserved, a testament to her brief, passionate foray into painting decades ago. As I moved through the echoing halls, a strange sense of peace settled over me. This wasn't just a house. It was a fortress, a place from which I could orchestrate my defense, and more importantly, my offense. They saw me as an intruder in their inherited paradise, but I was the rightful heir, armed with legal documents and my mother's foresight. The vastness of the estate was overwhelming, a burden that would have crushed a less determined individual. But I wasn't just determined. I was driven by a lifetime of being underestimated. They expected me to hoard, to indulge, to ultimately fail. They expected Amelia the dutiful daughter, or Amelia the bitter outcast. They were not prepared for Amelia the strategist, the inheritor of Eleanor Vance's sharpest instincts. The mansion was no longer just a house. It was my command center. The initial shock among my relatives began to recede, replaced by a calculated determination. They wouldn't accept Mom's will without a fight, or at least, without a very persistent attempt to exploit any perceived weakness. Michael, ever the opportunist, was the first to make a more strategic move, albeit a predictable one. He contacted me, not directly, but through a mutual acquaintance, a woman named Sarah, who had been Mom's social secretary for years. "Amelia," Sarah began, her tone overly sympathetic, "I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I've been so concerned about you. It's all been such a whirlwind, and I know how much Mom relied on my help. I wanted to see if there was anything I could do to support you during this difficult transition, perhaps help you settle into the mansion." I saw the play immediately. Michael was using Sarah, a woman who had direct access to Mom's routines and contacts, to gather intelligence, and perhaps to sow seeds of doubt about my ability to manage the estate. Mom had trusted Sarah implicitly, confiding in her about family matters. Now, Sarah was being weaponized. "Sarah, thank you for your concern," I replied, my voice even. "I'm quite capable of settling in, and Mom's will was very clear about her wishes. I'm the sole inheritor," Sarah continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Of course, dear. It's just, Michael was telling me how worried he is. He feels you're being isolated, that people are taking advantage. He thinks perhaps you need a trusted advisor, someone who understands the family dynamics, to help you see clearly. The implication was clear. I was being isolated, and Michael was the benevolent savior. Michael is mistaken, I stated firmly. I am not being isolated. I am taking control, and I have no need for an advisor who is also lobbying for my brother's interests. Thank you for your time, Sarah. I ended the call, feeling a pang of disappointment that even those closest to Mom could be so easily swayed by personal gain. Aunt Carol's strategy was more direct, focusing on social pressure. She began spreading rumors through her extensive network of wealthy socialites. Whispers about my unsuitability to manage such a significant estate, my supposed coldness and lack of maternal instinct, as if that were relevant, and hints that Mom had been pressured into making her final decisions. She was attempting to isolate me socially, to make me a pariah in the circles Mom had once navigated with such grace. Uncle George, meanwhile, was quietly making inquiries with a few of Mom's less scrupulous business associates, attempting to identify any potential financial vulnerabilities in the estate that he could exploit, or, failing that, to find disgruntled former partners who might be willing to back a legal challenge. He was a shark, circling, waiting for any sign of weakness, any drop of blood in the water. They were all playing their roles, their loyalty to Mom seemingly forgotten in the face of material gain. They believed that by attacking my character, by sowing discord, they could erode my claim. They were wrong. Their attempts to undermine me only solidified my resolve. Mom had faced down worse, and so had I. The legal correspondence began to flood my mailbox. Michael's lawyers sent a formal letter contesting the will on grounds of undue influence, a claim so baseless it was almost comical. They cited my intense and controlling personality and Mom's supposed deteriorating mental state in the months leading up to her death. It was a standard tactic, designed to intimidate and to drain my resources. Aunt Carol's approach was more subtle. Her lawyer sent a friendly inquiry regarding specific personal belongings, particularly a collection of antique Fabergé eggs and a rare first edition of Pride and Prejudice, which she claimed Mom had promised her years ago. It was a fishing expedition, an attempt to establish her perceived ownership of certain items, laying groundwork for future claims. Uncle George, predictably, went for the jugular. He contacted me with a proposal for a partnership, suggesting I invest a significant portion of the inheritance into one of his struggling businesses, promising exorbitant returns. He framed it as a way to honor Mom's legacy of philanthropy and entrepreneurial spirit. The truth, of course, was that he was desperate for a bailout. I met with my own legal counsel, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, who had been handpicked by Mom for this very purpose. "They're all posturing, Amelia," Ms. Davies assured me, sifting through the pile of documents. "Michael's claim is weak, based on conjecture rather than evidence. Aunt Carol's requests are sentimental, not legally binding. And your Uncle George, well, he's always been a gambler." "What's the best course of action?" I asked, my gaze fixed on the ornate cityscape visible through Ms. Davies's office window. "For Michael, we file a swift dismissal of his frivolous claim and seek sanctions for harassment. For Aunt Carol, we acknowledge her sentimentality, but politely remind her that the will is the final word. For Uncle George," she paused, a glint in her eye, "we explore his proposal with extreme caution. Perhaps we can use his desperation to our advantage." The advantage Ms. Davies spoke of involved a careful negotiation. I met with Uncle George at a neutral location, a quiet, upscale restaurant where the maitre d' seemed to know him well. He launched into his usual spiel, painting a picture of grand success, if only he had the capital. "Uncle George?" I interrupted, my voice calm and steady. "I've reviewed your proposal. Your business is ambitious, but frankly, the risk is too high for a direct investment at this time." His face fell slightly, but he quickly recovered. "Amelia, you must understand the potential. This could set us both up for life." "Perhaps," I conceded, leaning forward, "but I have my own plans for this inheritance. However, I am willing to offer your company a substantial loan secured by specific, tangible assets at a modest interest rate. It won't be a partnership, and it won't be a blank check. It will be a business transaction with clear repayment terms and penalties for default. And of course, I'll require full transparency into your financial operations." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of resentment, but also a grudging respect. He knew I was playing hardball, but he also recognized the lifeline I was offering. It wasn't the win he'd hoped for, but it was a lifeline, and his pride wouldn't let him refuse it outright. He was accustomed to exploiting family ties. He wasn't used to being treated as a mere business counterpart. The negotiation had begun, not with emotional appeals, but with cold, hard numbers. Life at the Vance mansion was settling into a new rhythm, a quiet consolidation of power. I spent my days poring over financial statements, meeting with estate managers, and meticulously overseeing the renovations I'd initiated to modernize the property while preserving its historical significance. The sprawling grounds, once neglected in areas, were being brought back to their former glory. It was a deliberate process, one that involved careful planning and a keen eye for detail, traits my family had always dismissed in me. One afternoon, while examining old family photographs, I stumbled upon a hidden compartment in Mom's antique writing desk. Inside, I found a collection of letters, bound by a faded ribbon, and a small, tarnished silver locket. The letters were from a man named Robert Sterling, dated nearly 40 years prior, long before my father had entered the picture. They spoke of a passionate, secret love affair, of shared dreams, and a painful, inevitable parting. Curiosity, a trait I'd inherited directly from Mom, gnawed at me. Who was Robert Sterling? Why had Mom kept these letters hidden? The locket contained a miniature portrait of a handsome, earnest-looking man with kind eyes. He was not my father. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Surprise, a strange sense of empathy for this unknown man, and a sharp pang of something akin to jealousy. My mother, the stoic Eleanor Vance, had a hidden romantic past, a passionate chapter I'd never known. As I delved deeper into the letters, a pattern emerged. Robert Sterling had been an artist, a struggling musician with a bohemian spirit, a stark contrast to the affluent, conservative world my family inhabited. Their love had been deemed unsuitable, a scandal waiting to happen. Mom had been pressured, perhaps by her own parents, to end the relationship and marry my father, a man of considerable wealth and social standing. The letters detailed her heartbreak, her internal struggle, and eventually, her resigned acceptance of her fate. This discovery offered a new perspective on Mom. It explained some of her melancholy, her quiet resilience, her underlying dissatisfaction that I had always sensed, but never fully understood. She had made sacrifices, compromises that had shaped her life, and perhaps, in turn, had shaped me. It also made me question the values my family held so dear, the emphasis on status, wealth, and appearances over genuine connection and passion. This knowledge was power. It revealed a vulnerability in Mom's carefully constructed public persona, a hidden facet that my family had never seen, or perhaps had never been privy to. It also made me wonder if Robert Sterling, or his legacy, played any part in Mom's eventual decisions regarding her estate. Had she left me everything as a final act of defiance against the world that had forced her to abandon her true love? Or was it a more pragmatic choice, a belief that I, unlike her, could navigate both the world of business and the pursuit of happiness on my own terms? The mystery of Robert Sterling had added another layer to the intricate tapestry of my mother's life, and by extension, my own inheritance. The whispers had intensified, morphing from subtle innuendos to outright accusations within certain social circles. Aunt Carol, emboldened by the supposed evidence of my unsuitability, had orchestrated a series of chance encounters at exclusive luncheons and charity galas. Her strategy was to subtly highlight my perceived lack of social graces, my solitary demeanor, and my apparent disinterest in the traditional Vance family activities. During one particularly ostentatious garden party, she managed to corner me near the champagne fountain. "Amelia, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with faux concern. "It's so wonderful to see you venturing out. We were all so worried you'd become a hermit in that enormous house. You know, Mom always said a woman of your standing needs to cultivate her connections. She would have wanted you to be here, mingling, charming everyone." She gestured vaguely towards a group of impeccably dressed women, their laughter tinkling like wind chimes. "Those are the really influential people, dear. The ones who can open doors. You should go over and introduce yourself. Perhaps mention your plans for the Vance Philanthropic Foundation. They'd be fascinated." I knew her game. She was trying to force me into a social arena where I was uncomfortable, hoping I would falter, say something awkward, or simply retreat, thus reinforcing her narrative of my inadequacy. "Thank you, Aunt Carol," I replied smoothly, taking a sip of my sparkling water. Mom also taught me the value of listening and observing before speaking. I find I learn more that way. I offered her a tight, polite smile, refusing to be drawn into her trap. Michael, meanwhile, had adopted a different tactic. He began subtly undermining my business dealings. He'd approach associates of my late mother, feigning concern about the stability of the estate under my management. "It's Amelia's first time handling such large assets," he'd confide, his voice laced with faux sympathy. "I just hope she doesn't make any rash decisions. She's always been a bit impulsive, you know. I'm just trying to ensure Mom's legacy is protected." He was attempting to erode confidence in my financial acumen, to plant seeds of doubt that could deter potential partners or investors. It was a cowardly approach, relying on backroom gossip rather than any concrete evidence of my mismanagement. The pressure was mounting, not just from my immediate family, but from the broader social and business networks they inhabited. They were a united front, or at least as united as their individual greed allowed. They saw me as an obstacle, a temporary inconvenience that stood between them and their perceived birthright. But what they failed to grasp was that I wasn't merely defending myself. I was actively shaping my future, and the future of the Vance legacy. Mom had entrusted me with her wealth, but more importantly, she had entrusted me with her intelligence, her foresight, her quiet strength. I was learning to navigate this social battlefield, not by engaging in their petty games, but by building my own sphere of influence, by making my own strategic alliances. Their attempts to isolate me were backfiring, pushing me to seek out those who valued competence and substance over superficial charm. The hidden locket, which had remained in my safe for months, called to me. The mystery of Robert Sterling had lingered, a soft undercurrent beneath the tumultuous events of the past year. I decided to use the resources I now commanded to find him, or at least his descendants. My investigation, a mix of old records and modern-day databases, led me to a quiet neighborhood in upstate New York. I discovered that Robert had gone on to become a respected, albeit minor, painter. He had never married. A single photograph of him in his later years showed a man with the same kind, earnest eyes from the miniature portrait. He seemed to have lived a simple life, a stark contrast to the opulence he had been forced to abandon. The realization hit me. My mother's choice had not only shaped her life, but had also, perhaps unintentionally, shaped his. Standing on the grand veranda, overlooking the meticulously manicured gardens, I felt not triumph, but a profound sense of peace. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of late-blooming roses. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, a symbol of the world I was now poised to influence. My family had sought to inherit Mom's fortune. Instead, they had inherited the consequences of their own flawed characters. They had underestimated me, viewing my quiet demeanor as weakness, my intelligence as a quirk. They failed to see the strategic mind honed by years of observation and the unyielding resolve inherited from my mother. Mom's final act, the endowment of her entire estate to me, was not just about wealth, it was about empowerment. It was a trust, a challenge, and a testament to her belief in my ability to transcend the petty squabbles and superficial values that had plagued our family. The journey had been arduous, fraught with conflict and manipulation, but it had led me here, to this moment of quiet sovereignty. The story of Eleanor Vance's inheritance was not about the money. It was about the unveiling of true character, the exposure of greed, and the quiet, unyielding triumph of a daughter who finally claimed her rightful place. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to our channel to see what happens next.